What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Grab Your Torch with Caleb and Joel. We're here to recap episode 9 of Survivor 48. And it's episode 9, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we're here to recap it and talk about a very interesting episode. The boot was pretty straightforward, but we also had a lot of time to sit and marinate with the drama and figure out the tribe dynamics a little bit more. So let's get into it. What did you think?
Definitely a great episode. Pretty predictable boot. I thought maybe there was a shot, maybe like Mitch win, but at the end of the day, it was just so much setup for the last couple episodes that David was going. And I think this was a great episode to kind of show us who's in contention, where everyone stands with each other, who's going where. And overall, I really liked it.
Yeah, I thought it was great. Just to get into it a little bit, I will say the first thing I noticed in this episode is the pacing. I just feel like it was so we had the ability to catch our breaths this episode
Mhm.
finally because they had an extra day to rest, which was nice. And so we got to see a little bit more of them talking. We had a scene with Mitch showing Star how to swim, like different things like that, which makes it more fun to watch, in my opinion. Like we just got more time to sit with them. That's why they need to bring it back to 39 days because it's too
Yeah.
too tight. But besides the point, I thought the episode was pretty well edited, and we got to see a lot of different additional dynamics, and I guess we've seen a lot of them already. We just got to see them a little bit more fleshed out and get to see how specific players were working and how each of them are doing their own games, which I think was pretty important for the narrative going forward.
I completely agree. And we kind of get to see more of like how everyone's kind of viewing the end game. Like what's their way to the end? Like what lines are people willing to cross? We got a lot of talk of jury management during tribal, which obviously was meant for David, but I think since he went, I think that was more like a like kind of telling of like what's happening later. And overall, I think this was like a pretty good episode of like telling us like where we're kind of heading, where everyone pretty much got a confessional. Maybe Mary didn't, but I think she did. But everyone got at least time to
I believe
talk.
she did.
Everyone got time to talk. Honestly, the person that was Loki most under edited this episode was Camilla. Like we heard everything through Kyle's eyes.
Yeah.
And
I'll see if I could start pulling up those stats, but you can keep talking.
yeah, which like kind of leads me to believe I think Camilla kind of talked about it that like on another season she would have thrived. Like she was kind of hinting at that. Where like if you put Camilla on like I don't know 41, like she probably like goes on to win like besides Erica. Like she's essentially just like Erica. And I think she's probably my take on Camilla right now. She's probably a better player than the game she's playing right now, and I don't think that's her fault. I think she got really unlucky with her this cast,
Right.
and I think she also got lucky in the sense that Kyle's there, but also I think Kyle is starting to get some motion that he would beat her, which I did not think coming into this episode.
Yeah, I do think the definitely the big three, like we talked about, if y'all watched our winner rankings earlier this week, we talked about how we thought that, the top three are definitely, Shaheen, Kyle, Joe, whatever order you put that in. And then there's definitely a separation between them and the rest, in our opinion. So I still agree with that going forward. And you're right, Mary had zero confessionals and Camilla only had one. So I thought that was really interesting. And the bottom
Yeah,
is very clearly edited. We got to see. I'll just read them off because I thought these were very interesting. 16 for Eva, 12 for Kyle, 9 for Joe, 6 for Shaheen, 5 for David, 3 for Star, 2 for Mitch, 1 for Camilla, 0 for Mary. So that's just really interesting,
yeah.
like the balance of that with it being episode 9 in the season. There's only 4 more episodes left. So I'm excited to see how it all shakes out. But I do think there's definitely some people that are kind of out of shot of winning. But we're in the top 8, and I think there's 4, maybe 5. I'd probably just say 4 main contenders that could win.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And there's some fringe people as well. I think this was honestly an incredible episode for Eva. I don't think she necessarily got her way. Honestly, I feel like her keeping David would have been the move. But it looked like Joe probably got a little more heat than she did. So we'll see what happens with that. because David, like, just scowled at Joe, which I do think is a little unlucky that Joe just happened to be next to him.
Right.
But I think overall we get to see Eva. First off, let's kind of like reverse back to the beginning. Eva goes on her little mission. Shaheen sees her, which I think is like the first time in Survivor I've ever seen someone be like lurking in the shadows behind
Right.
them.
That was a really funny clip when she was walking out and you could see him kind of coming up behind her a little bit. But
Hmm.
it really didn't really pay off to anything just because he went and told Joe and Joe doesn't really care. And he knows that she has an advantage now because she went and told him afterwards. So I think that was really good. If she didn't go back and tell them the truth, I think that could have been really useful information to have going forward because he clocked it. He's like she found an advantage, at the reward. She's going to get her advantage tonight, is what he was thinking. He clocked it correctly. And so I think going forward, he knows that has that knowledge, and that's important. So we'll see if like anything comes up out of it. But Eva's loaded. Eva and Joe, they're in a really good spot, just like power wise. They have a really good chance just to make it deep in the game. I don't think we'll see either of them go next week. There's a possibility, but I'm not sure. And from the next time on Survivor, it seems a little interesting. Like the bottom people are going after the top, so that would be Mary, Star, and Mitch are kind of getting together, trying to pull in Camilla, and trying to see if they can force a tie or do something else. But little did they know, still that Kyle and Camilla are lock solid together. So I think it's just kind of dependent on that. So I don't know if there's anything going on with that. I'm not sure
Yeah,
how to read that.
I completely agree. I've been kind of talking about it before, like how I envision like if Joe and Eva get to the end, like how do they do it? They're such a public duo. She just told literally Kyle, Shaheen, and Joe that like, those are the top four that we're talking about, plus Camilla, I would say. But, like how is she gonna do it? And how I see it is that like either Joe or Eva wins immunity and people are just scared to take the shot. Which I think Loki probably happened a little bit this episode and we didn't see it. Because there's no way that like Camilla is just sitting there letting Joe and Eva run this game. And I get that David is David, but at some point you got to take the shot. And especially now that Eva has two ways of getting out of like trouble, I think could be definitely deadly towards the end. And I think what they're at the final eight. So if Eva wins immunity, she's safe at final seven.
Hmm.
And who knows what happens at that point.
Right. And she has the idol for 6 and 5. She has a really good chance to make it all the way. I don't think there's a lot of opportunities for her to be voted out in the near future. So it's gonna see how everyone plays it. I do think they might take a shot at Joe next week or Eva, like them both together. We'll see if like if that's I'm pretty sure that's what the minority would target. And if Camille's a part of that, there's no way he's getting thrown out as a person. I'd also be a little bit worried about Shine at that point too, because he's been a name for a while now too. So he could get the brunt of it as well. But I could
Mhm.
also see them just going consensus, getting out one of the, you know, bottom tribe people, which wouldn't be as entertaining, but it would still be something to watch.
Yeah, I think it'd be a smarter move. If you're Kyle and Camilla and you take that shot at Joe and Eva at the final eight, like final eight is like historically a very popular round and a very big round for Survivor. And going forward, having them take out Joe and Eva, like they're the threats. Like they're now Joe and Eva, and they do not have
Right.
advantages. And so honestly, if I was in Kyle and Camilla's spot, I would low key I would think about Shaheen, even though they're working together now. I would maybe think about Star, just because like I think their Star is probably the closest to Joe and Eva, and just take away a potential number. Mitch, I mean, people keep talking about how big of a threat he is to win, and at some point, like smoke becomes fire. Like if these bottom four can take out one of the big dogs, like I can totally see a world where Mitch wins this thing.
Right. And there's definitely a chance for that. Not as strong in my opinion. I do think it's, the big four plus Camilla are like my contenders right now. And then with Mitch, Mary, and Star kind of being outside of that, Mary and Star have no shot of winning at this point, in my opinion. Especially Star. We also got a pretty weak episode from her. She's so entertaining though when she's on the screen. I don't know why they don't show her. It's like every time that she, even at tribal council, when she was like, what Camilla is really saying is,
Like
is
I'm not
this.
voting for you.
Yeah, I'm not voting for you. Yeah, that was a really funny moment too.
Yeah, it's really good. And I think let's talk about the immunity for a second because this one actually had like a lot of bearing on the game.
Right,
We see that David, like, honestly, if David didn't like stumble there, he like 1,000% wins it.
right. He was locked.
Pretty surprised Joe won that, honestly. And I like low key with David gone, like Joe's in a pretty good spot that he could probably win a few more. Obviously, there's Kyle, there's Mitch, but we can see Mitch is pretty depleted.
Right.
And I'm there. I can see a world where like Joe gets targeted in the next episode, he wins immunity again. Like,
It's the case. Yeah, it could be the case.
and I wonder if he'll get the four. I think there's a good chance he does.
I feel like there could be as well. I will say this. I don't think that Joe's gonna win at this point. I think he's probably the bottom of that five, in my opinion. I think
Yeah.
Eva might have gone up even more than him this week, just because we had a lot of good content from her. We got to hear how she was like, I want to keep my alliance together. I trust everyone, but I want to make sure that my alliance also trusts me as well, and I can go with them. And so that's why she went and took out David, which I think was a smart move. To kind of sticking all together the rest of them to take out David, instead of splitting it apart the other way, because I think it could have gone the other way, and it wouldn't be as big a deal because the name they threw out was Mitch, which I do think was smart from David and Mary. But anyways, I do think that Joe does not have a great chance to win because when it comes down to it at the end, we got this full like 2 minute scene of David confronting Joe, being like, "Hey, you're all about honesty and loyalty. You kind of broke your word." And Joe, the rest of the episode's like, "I did not break my word. I did not break my word." I do think when it comes down to it at Final Tribal Council, if he's asked, "Did you play an honest and loyal game?" He's gonna not own up to the fact that he didn't, and he's gonna own up. He's gonna just be like, "Yeah, I did. I played that way the whole game. That's how I play." And he will pull a coach from South Pacific and not fully own up to him being lying and deceitful to try to win $1 million. And I do think that's kind of where his game will fall flat, in my opinion. But he might not even make it there to begin with. But I do think there's a good shot for him to make it to the end. But I don't think he's going to be able to convince for the win unless the jury cares more about like him being a family man and uh just being a nice guy overall, because I think that would be definitely a way for him to win as well, just because like Jeremy, like they're all like, okay, he won unanimously. I do think he might lose some votes though if he doesn't own up to the fact that he did lie and try to win the game.
Yeah, look, I've iconically really been on the Joe train, and I even now I think this was like a pretty okay episode for him. Like we got so much unnecessary content from him, I feel like, where like Eva and Shaheen have like this moment and like Joe's kind of part of it, but Shaheen's like, I need her to like I can use this, like all this stuff, and Joe's like, I know she's gonna tell me. And then the scene that like Eva's like, hey guys, I have this advantage isn't about Eva, it's about Joe trusting Eva. And I think that was a good sign, but I definitely am starting to get some Mike from 42 vibes. I'm definitely starting to feel like this he could be the dragon at the end that needs to be slain. And he might just give that up for Eva, which I do think like if one and the other is not there, like the other person on the jury is really gonna push for them. And I think them together at the end would be interesting, but I think Joe would ultimately pull it out because a lot of what like exit press have said, specifically with like Charity, Say, and like the women, is that Say doesn't really like, or not Say, excuse me, Eva doesn't really talk to women, which she talked about, but that could definitely turn a few off. And I honestly don't know where Chrissy and Cedric stand with
Who
Joe.
knows?
Like,
What an interesting first three jurors with Cedric, Chrissy, and and
and
David.
honestly,
Crazy.
David going out so early, like I can rationalize in my head. Obviously, he was pretty mad at Joe, but also he could just be like, "You guys, we were rivals. Like, I promise. Like, we said one of us, like a big guy's gonna win, and I
That's
want a big
true.
guy to win." And so I think David's a real wild card. But I still have faith. I think I have more faith in Joe over than like probably Camilla and like I think Eva, but I think those two are equal right now. If you're looking at the game strictly of like without the edit and everything, I think like Kyle's in like such a golden spot to
Oh
win
my
many.
gosh, he's such an amazing spot. Somehow,
He's
like
honestly like
his episode this week was fantastic. He was able to bounce back pretty strongly. People keep thinking that he's the next to go just because of what happened last week, with him kind of stumbling over a little bit and going a little bit crazy. The thing is, David was right. He clocked it perfectly that him and Shaheen were working together and were gunning after him and Mary. So, you know, props to David for figuring that out. He just wasn't able to get the artillery going, to make something happen. I do think it was the right move to go for someone like Mitch that could be more consistent, consensus, but it ultimately just didn't work out because of him and Mary just being too paranoid and stirring up a lot of chaos. But I will say, going back to Kyle, I think when he had that conversation with Joe by the water, like by the ocean, like when he was talking about his background and how that kind of led to him being a little bit over emotional, like in the previous day with all the scrambling going on. I think that was really smart and calculated. It was a human
I
moment, but it was
agree.
also a game moment. Like he kind of pulled off both at the same time. And then additionally, when he went to Shaheen and had that conversation right at the beginning of the episode and said, "Hey man, they were trying to go after you, like because they think that you and Camilla were tight." And so that brought Shaheen with him together as well. And so I do think that the big three, I mean, outside of the big five, which includes Camilla, I do think the big three are Kyle, Camilla, and Shaheen right now that are really in the best position, in my opinion, in the game. Because we have your bottom people that are not getting any traction at all with Mitch, Mary, and Star. And then you also have your top people with Joe and Eva that are kind of the top, but I mean they are in a really good spot, but that could easily the wool could be or the rug could be pulled from under them, is what I'm trying to say.
I agree. And I think it was a very interesting confessional that like to me, like I like I've said before, I think Camilla has played a really good game for the cast she's had. I think in literally any other new era season, she probably goes on to win because she's just like the perfect player for the new era. But I think with like this season and specifically, we've always like Survivor's always said that like social above strategic. Like Kinsey and Charlie was always like the social versus strategic, even though, Charlie's also super social. But like it's been established over and over, and Kyle being like, "Hey, I'm the one gathering information. I'm the one being social, and she's the one figuring out the problem."
Right.
And I think it is beautifully articulated. And like one of their first scenes when like he finds the idol and makes her like figure it out. Like that is such a good like representation of their relationship. But ultimately he got the idol and he played it and he saved himself.
Right.
And I think Camilla's probably like I think them together are probably some of the best players of the new era.
For sure.
And I'd say they're both playing great games, but I don't think Camilla will get the votes anymore, especially after being like, I'm not going to vote for you, David, and then David goes home. You know what I mean? Like David's never going to vote for Camilla, but he would vote for Kyle in the right situation, even though he might be a little sus of him. But I think Kyle's like, he's an attorney. Like attorneys do really good at final travel.
Right.
So I think there's a really good shot Kyle could like go on and do this thing. And arguably, I mean, if he keeps up this momentum, is he like the best new era winner?
It could be.
Like,
I do think that's a possibility. And I might be overthinking into it, overreading it, but it does seem to me that he is using Camilla as like, your smart new era woman winner meat shield in this season 48 where it's kind of this meat shield alliance is getting together. I think he's using her now as a shield for him because she's the dangerous player technically between the two of them. Like if you think about the
mhm.
recent New Era seasons and how people viewed that. I do think that they'll take that more seriously. And I do think when it comes down to it, they'll take a shot at Camilla, like they've already tried, before they take a shot at Kyle. Kyle's name still hasn't really come up.
No, and even though like he's been sketchy and everything, and kind of to your point when he talked about the beach, such a incredible scene of like Kyle like explaining why he was doing that, covering his tracks, pretty much emotionally pulling Joe in, where like Joe like said before, he's like, David's manipulating me. Kyle proceeds to manipulate him.
Yeah.
And so I totally see a world where like Kyle wins. I would think I might put Kyle at one now if I had to redo everything. I think him starting the game off going super fast, breaking the bucket, but being kind and like learning to be slow has really changed, like been a cool story. And I think every winner needs a story. And so I think one of the good editings of 48 has been everyone kind of has one. And pretty much, yeah, pretty much everyone but Star and Mary, even though Mary's like the last, what, Siva? See, what was her tribe? The Green Tribe?
Vula.
Vula, yeah, last Vula member. She hasn't really got anything about that.
Right.
So I can totally see her being a goat
And her being Zero Confessionals in
so many
episode
times.
9, and it's been multiple times. Her edit has gone from like peaking up at episode 3 and dropped all the way down. And so
Yeah.
it's just not a good sign for her.
No, I agree. And I think like we could talk a little about like next week because I think next week is like the true like what's actually going to happen.
Yeah, I guess we can kind of already jump into predictions. I will say before we do that, I will say I think Shaheen had a really good episode as well. I loved the flashback scene where he was talking about him planting seeds to getting rid of David. That
That's
was
great.
fully directed by him. We got to see his full perspective on that. He clocked that to be correct. And then we also, I already mentioned, but in the scene with him finding Evo leaving camp, I think he also had a really strong read there as well. I just thought it was a really good Shaheen episode. He's playing well. I think he has a really good shot to win as well.
I
I would still probably put him at number one, and then very closely behind being Kyle, and then I'd honestly probably put even next at three if I
yeah.
had to redo my top three.
Honestly, I think that was a really good team for him. A lot of winners kind of get credit when like they don't need credit. And like he obviously did a lot of work, but it's good that they showed it because that move could have gone to like a lot of people. Like the fact that they kind of gave that more to Shaheen and Kyle than Camilla, who like Camilla like hates David, like shows
Right.
that those two are pretty going to be pretty high up there. What reminds me of like Erica when like during the Ricard vote, they kind of like cut to her being like, we should like split the vote. And like, and everyone's like, okay, yeah. And like, they kind of like gave her the credit for doing that, even
Yeah,
though it's more of like a Ricard vote.
sure.
And so stuff like that. And I could definitely see Shaheen winning. I think he'd be a really good winner. I think a lot of these people would be really good winners in my
I
eyes.
agree. I think it's great that we have so many top contenders. I'd even like I think the only two people at this point I'd be disappointing in winning are Star and Mary just because we haven't seen enough from them. I mean, Mary could still be interesting. We could have a turnaround, but I do think they would all could be pretty interesting, including Mitch.
Yeah, I think Mitch would be a cool story, cool underdog story. Very inspirational. I feel like he's like, I don't know, they set him up such as like a hero, like such a good guy.
Yeah,
But we don't really get hero winners anymore. I don't think we get villain winners. I
right.
think Survivor like the winners that are like kind of gray, they're not perfect. Like we saw like what's a good example? Like Kenzie's like, gets frustrated. She didn't pull off the move against Tiff and someone stole it. Like stuff like that where I think moving forward, like I don't think Mitch could win. I kind of hope he does. A
Yeah,
little spoilery, a little out of this meta that if you don't want to, this is my crazy prediction, okay? So Mitch went to like I think like a March Madness or like finals game with like three former Survivor winners.
it's true.
And
I wouldn't read into that though.
oh, I'm reading into it
You're reading
because
into it?
I'm reading into it. Because at first I was like, okay, whatever. It's just like one. Then it was two others. I'm like, I know y'all have a group chat. I know. And so
But I don't think they spoil that until the season comes out. I think most people pretty good at not spoiling stuff like that. They don't even tell their families. So I wouldn't say that they kind of leaked that already.
just you wait, future Joel and Caleb. Refer
Sounds
back to
good.
the moment when I shoot my
I'll
shot.
clip this and put it in the podcast on the finale if you're right.
My trick with this podcast is I say everyone wins so that I can never be wrong.
Sounds good.
Next week will be my star win.
There you go.
No.
But anyways, I don't do I have anything else to say? Oh yeah, predictions. What do you think?
Um, I think this will be a very interesting episode. Honestly, Eva having like the safety without power is low-key like not good. She should have just kept the extra vote.
Yeah,
Like just the
extra vote
natural
is
tie.
powerful too, especially
But
with going into 8.
yeah. But I do like understand the reasoning. Like just leaving tribals is so cool.
Hmm.
But I think even like giving it to someone would be like more beneficial being like, hey, you're like cooked. You gotta leave and then like you have numbers. I think that's more beneficial. But I also like looking at it like, yeah, it could be 4-4. We could tie it. I I think if they're saying it's 4-4, then they don't have an accurate read of like what's
They don't
happened.
because Camilla and Kyle are together, and if they're saying Camilla's with them and not Kyle, then I just think that's not accurate. I think it was
Yeah.
Mary that was saying that in the trailer too. So I don't know if she has a really accurate read on that.
Yeah,
Obviously,
and
she doesn't, but I
just
do think Kyle and Camilla are once again in the middle.
mhm.
Here's my prediction. I do think it's probably going to be a straightforward vote for Mary, if I were to guess, or maybe Mitch. I think Star's going to be like 0 vote finalists, like locked in at this
Yeah.
point. Besides that, if Eva, for some reason, if the she gets spooked with the underdog quote unquote alliance going to target for her, and she uses her safety without power and doesn't leave the idol for Joe, I do think that could be a precarious situation for Joe.
Mhm.
But I don't know if Kyle and Camilla would kind of switch on a whim to do something like that. They could, but I'm not sure if they would or not. But
Yeah,
I say it's either most likely consensus boot for bottom player, or maybe they take a swing at Joe.
I think, this is such a one of those where like, when they say they're targeting someone on Survivor, it's like on like next on Survivor, it's like rarely gonna happen.
Right.
Um, and I think Joe's just like set up to be such a massive player. For him to go out like final eight would be kind of underwhelming. But
I mean,
also,
David had a really good edit too. He went out
I think they loved it,
final
David.
9.
I
Yeah,
could totally see him on 50.
I do think
Realistically, I could see him
at
on
this
50.
point, if we're talking 50, I think Jonathan's locked in, bro. I think Jonathan has to be in.
Oh, is he in?
I think he is.
Wow. That guy is such a. I feel like David is like the evolution of Jonathan if he was like on a season of actually big people.
Yeah.
Um, which, hey, people forget Jonathan was like honestly a pretty good strategic player. Like he was
Yeah.
decent. He
Yeah.
just
He was decent. He probably wasn't gonna win, but
no.
he
He
could
was a
have.
lot like David in the fact that like they kind of like have to have their way. They don't really
Yeah.
like talk about it very well. Or if they were like Joe, like Joe's like chill and calm. If they're like a look like 15% more like that, it would just they probably would have had a more better shot.
Yeah.
But
The
I was
meathead
gonna
strat doesn't always work.
oh no. I was gonna say I don't think naturally like this round, I don't think Joe's name would come up. We've kind of seen that he's like made these relationships like specifically with Kyle. Like Kyle came to him. I don't think Shaheen would want Joe to go here. Because they both kind of need Joe moving forward with numbers, or else the bottom people are gonna really overtake everyone. And I think like I feel like next episode is when that four, the swap of Kyle, Camilla, Joe, and Shaheen. I think that's when this is gonna come into play. Where I think they're gonna be like, this moment where we all shared our stories, which everyone's saying that Kyle didn't get personal content then. He got it now, and he got a whole episode of it. So I kind of, shout out the Kyle edit. But from my perspective, I don't think it'll be Joe. I think it will probably be someone on the bottom. I think it's probably going to be Mary,
Yeah.
uh, because after a chaotic vote like that, you kind of want like something to ease tensions and everything, and like kind of put everyone back in the same place. Because I feel like Mary is going to get mad that Joe lied to them and target Joe
Yeah.
when I don't think anyone else would do that. But I might be wrong.
Fair. I'd agree with that. That's a good take.
Thank you, thank you. I try my best.
All right. Anything else to add for the episode?
No, any Survivor 50 news?
Not that I've seen lately. There's been more like slightly like 90% from Redmond of like who's on the cast, but they're not we don't have actual names. We just have like the season number and the gender basically.
Yeah, I
So
saw
you can
something like
pretty
that.
speculate. I have no idea what actually be on the cast, but I feel like there's a decent grasp of like the contenders for it. And 49 is about a week in the filming, so that's also pretty exciting news too. So we're really getting close to when all the 50 players are going out, and we might have some more news on the cast very soon
Yeah.
because it changes on a dime.
That's true. And I've seen so many memes now that it's just like Survivor fans holding like Survivor 50 just like hold so close and then ignoring Survivor 49. You
I know it's
know
so
what?
sad.
I'm excited for 49. I'm excited to see one player probably be on 50.
Yeah,
I haven't heard anything
I don't.
about
There's
40.
no one from 49 going to be on 50. Not a chance. They have too many
You
people
don't
to.
think so?
No chance. No chance.
I think there might be one.
Like maybe one from 48, but I doubt it.
Dang, you don't think the turnaround?
No, I don't think so.
You know what?
Unless they have like some sort of Russell Hantz, character. Like that's the only
That's what
reason.
I'm saying. Like there's a shot.
But more than likely, there's no shot. I do think though, pretty heavy prediction, like 52, 51, 52 is probably going to be New Era All Stars or something similar to that.
Yeah, didn't like casting like skip one or something like that? I don't know.
Well, the casting website just says apply for season 51 and future seasons.
Hmm.
That's all it says. So I don't think it's too much to read into. I think they've done stuff like that in the past, but we'll see.
Hey, hopefully so. And if it's New Era All Stars, I would kind of like people like Jonathan, like people like that to be on 50. Kind of like not the like Carolines and Jessies of the world, but kind of like the people kind of below them, like the casuals really love.
Yeah,
And like see a season where like you get to see like I don't know, you get to see Rome attack Jesse.
for
I
sure.
don't really want Rome back, but
I
you
don't
know,
think they will either. But anyways, it's been fun to talk about it. I hope we have another good episode next week. I doubt that we'll see a Pagong from here on out. This is definitely really nice to have some sort of mix up to the situation. So I'm excited to talk about how the season will shake out. We have so many good contenders going forward. So if you are watching on YouTube, please leave a like and subscribe. And please give a comment on the video as well. Just share your thoughts on the episode. Love to hear them. And me or Joel, most likely me because I'm on the YouTube account, will probably respond to you. So try to get some conversations going. And then without further ado, we'll catch you guys later.
yes, sir. See ya.